Dust swirled like a storm around the courtyard, catching the golden light of the afternoon sun. 500 soldiers stood in rigid formation, their eyes locked on the two figures at the center of the parade ground. One, a decorated colonel, his chest heavy with medals, lunged forward with the arrogance of a man unchallenged for decades. The other, a young woman in plain fatigues, did not flinch. The colonel's boot arced high, aimed at her ribs. In that instant, before anyone could breathe, she moved. Not with rage, not with panic, but with a precision born of scars and silence. Her hand caught his leg mid-swing, and with one measured twist, the courtyard cracked with the sound of bone giving way. The colonel collapsed onto the ground, gasping, clutching at a leg that would never carry him the same way again. And she only stood there, silent, still, dust curling around her boots. 500 mouths opened in shock. 500 chests filled with a stunned, reverent silence. Her name was Captain Elena Marquez. She was not supposed to be there, not supposed to overshadow her superiors. To most of the men assembled, she was just another officer sent to enforce drills, a reminder of orders and discipline. But to a few, those who had fought beside her, she was the quiet shadow who had dragged bleeding comrades from fire, who had patched wounds under shelling, who had carried more than her share of the weight. Yet here she was, standing in front of them all, treated not as a comrade but as a target. The colonel had mocked her when the drill began. He mocked the way she stood, the way her uniform fit, the way she dared to give commands in front of men who had earned their salt. But it was the way she refused to answer back that stoked his fury. Elena had said nothing. She never did. And silence, to men like him, was more insulting than words. Elena Marquez had been raised in a border town where war was not an event, it was the air she breathed. By the time she was 10, she could tell the difference between the whistle of incoming mortar and the pop of small arms fire. Her father had been a mechanic, her mother a nurse, both working through nights lit by tracer fire. She had lost her older brother to an ambush. She had buried him herself, carrying his weight in her thin arms because no one else had come. The military wasn't just a career. It was survival. At 18, she enlisted not out of ambition, but out of necessity. In her first year, she was deployed to a valley where the dust carried the smell of blood and gunpowder. There, she learned what it meant to endure. She treated wounds with torn fabric, carried broken men across minefields, and once went 3 days without water just to keep a dying comrade alive until medevac arrived. War carved her into silence. Where others boasted, she remembered the faces of the fallen. Where others shouted commands, she whispered prayers. And where others wore their medals like shields, hers lay hidden in a drawer, unseen, because each one reminded her of the men who had not come home. To her soldiers, she was a shadow of steel. To her superiors, she was an inconvenient reminder that true power does not shout. The courtyard was meant to be routine, just another inspection. The colonel had arrived in polished boots, every step echoing with authority. His chest glittered with awards earned long before most of the men were born. He barked orders, his voice slicing through the air like a whip. Then he singled her out. "Show them how you stand, Captain," he sneered, circling her like a predator. "Straighten your shoulders. You represent weakness." She stood still, her jaw tight, eyes fixed forward. "Speak up, girl," he pressed. "Or is silence all you've got?" Still, she said nothing. The soldiers shifted, eyes flicking between their superior and the woman standing like stone. No one dared to intervene. The colonel's voice grew louder, sharper. His insults turned personal, then cruel. He mocked her family, her service, her very presence in uniform. He demanded a reaction. But Elena had survived worse than words. And her silence made him furious. The colonel's rage reached its breaking point. He wanted to humiliate her, not with words, but with spectacle. He stepped back, eyes narrowing. Then, in front of 500 witnesses, he drew his leg back and launched a kick aimed squarely at her. Gasps rippled through the ranks. The world slowed. Dust lifted with the arc of his boot. And Elena moved. Her hand caught his leg mid-swing. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. She twisted, precise and controlled. The colonel's body crumpled as his knee bent the wrong way. He hit the ground with a cry swallowed by silence. For the first time, the soldiers saw something their colonel had never shown them: fragility. Elena released his leg, letting it fall useless to the dirt. Then she stepped back, hands at her sides, as if nothing had happened. She didn't gloat. She didn't speak. Her silence was louder than his scream. In that stillness, her thoughts whispered words she would never say aloud. Strength does not shout. It endures. I did not break him. His arrogance did. Respect cannot be commanded. It must be earned. And though she spoke none of them, every soldier present felt their weight. The colonel was carried away, his pride shattered as much as his leg. The men stood frozen, their discipline breaking as murmurs spread. But no one mocked her now. No one doubted her strength. One by one, like a tide of quiet acknowledgement, the soldiers shifted their stance, not toward the colonel's absence, but toward her presence. 500 pairs of boots struck the ground in unison. Not an order. Not a command. Just silent respect. It was not applause. It was not cheering. It was something deeper: recognition. For the first time, her silence had been answered. That evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Elena sat alone in her quarters. She did not celebrate. She did not smile. She thought of the men she had carried, the blood she had washed from her hands, the nights she had lain awake hearing the cries of the dying. She thought of the colonel, not with hatred, but with pity. For men like him fought for themselves, while she had always fought for others. And in that difference lay the quiet truth. Real strength was not in medals or rank or the sound of one's voice. It was in the silence of sacrifice, in the endurance of scars, in the unshakable dignity of standing when others fall. So the story of Captain Elena Marquez did not end with a broken leg. It ended with 500 soldiers learning that silence can be stronger than any shout, and that true respect is not demanded. It is given freely to those who have earned it. And perhaps, if there is one truth worth carrying from this courtyard to every battlefield, every home, every life, it is this: the loudest voice in the room is not always the strongest. Sometimes, it is the one that does not need to speak at all. If this story moved you, share it. Tell us where you're watching from and what respect means to you. And if you believe in honoring the quiet heroes, the ones who carry battles silently, without asking for recognition,